Hi, and welcome to this presentation with Rottneros. My name is Benedicte Ås, and I work as an equity research analyst at ABG. Please allow me to introduce Monica Pasanen from Rottneros. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Benedicte. Yes, my name is Monica Pasanen. I'm CFO at Rottneros, and it's a pleasure being here today to talk a bit more about Rottneros. If we change slide, we will see where we are geographically. Our production sites are in Sweden. Our main product is pulp, and we are producing pulp at Vallvik mill on the east coast. That is chemical pulp. And we are producing mechanical pulp at Rottneros mill in the middle of Sweden. Apart from pulp, we are also producing packaging. It's molded trays made of wood pulp, mainly for food packaging. In addition, we have two wood procurement organizations, one in Sweden, Nyqvist Skogs, and one in Latvia, Rottneros Baltic. Some main figures about Rottneros. Turnover is a bit more than 2 billion Swedish crowns. We are a bit production oriented, but we produce 413,000 tons, a bit more depending on the year. And we are approximately 318 employees in the company. We can move to the next slide and look at some of our long-term targets, and I'll pinpoint a few of them. We have a target to pay a dividend of 30 to 50% of our net profit per year. During the pandemic, we had a very good 2019, but did not pay any dividend in 2020. Due to the uncertainty on the market. 2020 was not such a good year for us, which meant that we didn't pay any dividend in the spring. But we have done a refinancing, which means that we now have the possibility to also distribute to our shareholders. And at the end of August, we announced that the board of directors has a proposal of a 45 öre, 0.45 Swedish crowns per share, and has called to an extraordinary general meeting on the 22nd of September. Something else that we can point out here is that, for example, that we want to increase our share of revenue that is not coming from pulp to be above 10%. This is due to that we are operating in a fairly cyclical market, and we want to have other income than purely pulp. We are now at approximately 6 to 7% of revenue that is not from pulp, and these revenue sources come from packaging, from byproducts in the production of pulp, and also the sales of wood. Then we can continue to the next page. Rottneros and as investment. We are very happy to be part of the circular economy. We are using a renewable resource, wood, and we are producing pulp that is going to paper and board production that is part of the circular economy, where we are replacing fossil-based products. And the whole pulp and paper forest sector is also part of the reduction of carbon dioxide and is an important part in the way forward in our circular economy. Rottneros is not the biggest player on the market, but we are very focused on niches. As I mentioned before, we have both chemical and mechanical pulp, and we are doing both bleached and unbleached, and being a bit smaller makes it possible to also make tailor-made products to our customers, and that is where we are very strong in our niches. We also have a solid balance sheet, which has been a great asset during the pandemic. And the strong balance sheet also gives us the possibility to pay the dividend that is now proposed. Let's then have a look at the market. We can take actually 2 slides forward. One is only a heading. Yes, pulp market, a cyclical market. What we are seeing here is the price of pulp. It is NBSK, Northern Bleached Sulfate Kraft. That is the kind of pulp that we are producing at Vallvik Mill. And this is the price in Europe, and the dark line is in US dollars, and the lighter green line is in Swedish crowns. We think that the price in Swedish crowns is important, as we have the majority of our costs in Swedish crowns. These lines are the average price per quarter, and if we look at the dollar price, it was just below $1,200 per ton in the second quarter. Now, if we look at the next slide, this is a more granular picture. So you see the cyclicality, but here the line is the pulp price per month, which is now at 1340. It's of course very difficult to predict where the price is going. There are many experts trying to predict this, but we believe that this is probably a peak for the moment, and the question is, of course, what it will look forward. One thing that we keep an eye on is the inventory levels, that is the bars, and how many days of production that producers have in inventory. We do see an increase, but we don't see the same stock levels as we saw in 2019, 18, 19. We can take 1 slide forward. This is the production of paper and board in Europe, so basically our customers. And we are looking at the first half year this year compared to last year, which was the pandemic. So it is a lot of these comparisons are impacted by the pandemic. But there's an increase in production of 5%, which is a bit unusual. Normally we would see a fairly flat level in Europe, whereas the increases are mainly coming from Asia in normal years. Also, when we look at the comparison per type of paper and board, this is impacted by the pandemic. The first 3 bars, newsprint, uncoated, and coated papers, had a very tough first beginning in the pandemic, and that is why we now see an increase compared to last year. Containerboard, board, other packaging, that was strong during the pandemic and even stronger now. We see that this is a sector that is growing. Tissue, you might remember that we all had a lack of tissue last year, which means that this drop is basically just a picture of that. It was a bit wild on the tissue and toilet paper sector last year. This bar others contains many of the niches where we are active. It could be filters, electrotechnical applications, and other special papers. If we take the next slide, we will see a bit of Rottneros position with the end users. So to the right, you see ECF and UKP. These are 2 grades produced at Vallvik Mill. ECF is a bleached pulp, whereas UKP, unbleached kraft pulp, is unbleached. And the 2 bottom ones are groundwood and CTMP, the mechanical pulps produced at Rottneros Mill. And depending on what properties you're looking for in the end product, you will choose different pulps. And you see that it's a lot of lines going around, but really you can pick and choose from our pulps to get the best mix for what you're looking for. If we take, for example, Vallvik Mill, we're making a very clean pulp, and this is needed in electrotechnical applications, installations. It is needed in filters, both for engines and, for example, coffee filters. And when we are talking about molded pulp and board, a clean pulp is needed for food packaging. On the next slide, you can see the distribution of how Rottneros sales was distributed in 2020. So we are still having a big part going to printing and writing, but our really niches that we are focusing on is board and packaging, filter, electrotechnical applications, and special applications. And within these special applications, it can, for example, be baking paper. Going forward, we will look a bit on what happened in Q2 in Rottneros. So we can take one slide more. So we had a very strong pulp market in the second quarter. You saw the prices on the pulp, but we also had a very good demand. The shipping issues that we have had in the world also played in our favor. Europe is our home market. We are selling some 75% of our production in Europe, and we didn't really see imports coming into Europe from primarily Asian markets. We had a very stable production during the month, and this together gave a very good improvement in result, and we will see that going forward. We also have a new financing. This did not happen in Q2, but in July. So the month after, we have had 400 million bond that we repaid, and then we replaced it by a long-term loan of 150 million, and with an additional revolving credit facility of 100 million that can be used when needed. Then if we look at the result in Q2, which is on next slide, we can see that we're going from 2 million EBIT to 87 million EBIT. So this is a big improvement. This waterfall shows where it's coming from. We have the price and currency. Mainly price, because currency was on a slightly higher level if we look at US dollar towards Swedish crowns. We also had a good impact from variable costs. Availability of wood for the pulp sector is very good. Since the sawmills are doing well, we also get the other wood coming out of the forest at a high rate, which means that we have good availability of wood and also at lower prices than last year. We have also had a positive impact from electricity prices, which might sound a bit weird, since the electricity prices are higher this year than last year. This comes from our hedges. We have more or less 100% hedges for electricity, and this year the price in SE3, where we consume most of our electricity, is on par with the system price in the Nordic countries, which means that our hedges are efficient, and this was not the case last year. On the fixed cost side, we see an improvement, but this is partly due to that we had a maintenance shutdown in Q2 in Rottneros mill last year, whereas that is actually ongoing now as we speak this year. So it's not a fair comparison in that respect. If we look at the next slide, we see the first half year, this year versus last year. Also a good improvement from 50 to 108. Here we see that price and currency have a negative impact. We actually didn't see the impact on our sales in Q1, as we are having some lag between price increases and until we have orders with new prices and invoicing with new pricing. So on the first half year, we see a negative impact from price and currency, whereas variable costs again give a good positive contribution, and we have the same explanations from input costs, where wood is at a good level, good availability, and good price on electricity. We also have slightly lower costs for the chemicals used in the production. On the next slide, you will see development of EBIT and EBITDA. 2018, which is not on the picture, and 2019 were 2 good years. Pandemic year was less good for us, and in Q4 you can see that it is a big minus, which comes from annual maintenance shutdown at Vallvik mill in this quarter. And we're happy to show a good increase in profitability now in Q1 and Q2. On the next slide, which is a bit busy, the line shows the equity ratio, which is on this slide around 58% at the end of the second quarter. With the new financing, that has increased to approximately 65% with reduced loans. We have strong liquidity. The dark bars is the cash flow from operations. And then if we look at the net debt, which is the light green bars, we had higher debt during 2018 and a bit into 2019. And this is the period where we had our big investments in our mills. We have invested approximately 1 billion Swedish crowns during the last 5 years, and the majority is in 17, 18, 19, compared to our turnover of just above 2 billion Swedish crowns. Okay, so what is happening next? We can take 2 slides forward. Trends that are favoring pulp, not only Rottneros, but the whole sector, is the increase, the growth in tissue with emerging markets, stronger market. That is a sector that is growing. E-commerce is definitely growing the use of packaging. We see many initiatives in textiles to be more circular, also favoring pulp. And of course, the whole sustainability trend means that a lot of products made of fossil materials are replaced by paper and board. And if we take the next slide, you will see examples of our own products, the molded pulp trays that we are producing at the moment, or that we now are producing in our mill in Sunne. You can find these products throughout Europe. To some extent, it is not big, but you can find them in the supermarkets. They have long shelf life. We are also looking at the next step with our packaging to have additional capacity in Central Europe, and we are looking at that opportunity with a Central European partner. And in general, we have a lot of interest from the market for these trays. The challenge is really the production capacity. And then we can take the next slide, which is really a summary of where we are. We have a very strong pulp market that we are benefiting from at the moment. We have stable operations, strong balance sheet and a new financing, and also increased capacity with the new production line at packaging. So that was the presentation. So I give it over to you, Benedicta.
Hi, Monica. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. We have a few minutes left, so we have time for a short Q&A. And my first question is regarding your targeted production growth of 3% per year. Could you elaborate on how you plan to achieve this target, and also for how many years do you target to increase production by 3% per year?
Yes, that's a good question. We have through our investment program, we have a higher capacity than we say that our capacity at the moment is approximately 440,000 tons in total. And we have achieved that by the investments that we have done the past years. We're able to increase production further by increased efficiency, by increased availability in the mills, and that we can do for some years. But after that, of course, we will need additional investments to take away bottlenecks. And if we're going to take a big step forward, then of course it will be a strategic investment at some stage. But for some years forward, we can achieve growth in our production.
Thank you. And also regarding this investments that you did from 2015 to 2018, would you say that these investments now are completed? And do you plan further organic growth investment? Have you seen some possibilities, or do you plan for organic growth going forward?
Yes, the big investments for right now is behind us, and they are partly in capacity, partly in environmental investments that are needed in our industry. And so we have a good platform. The growth that we see is basically these 3% in our pulp mills. Whereas if we want to take big steps, it has to be investments or something else.
And also for the fiber packaging part of your business, this is currently a very small part, but could you elaborate on the long-term strategy here? And also, how does your fiber packaging differentiate from competitors' packaging solutions?
Yes, our strategy is to first have a proof of concept factory in Sunne, where we now have our factory, and to showcase that we can produce high quality products. And the next step is to add on additional factories. They can either be something that we do on our own or with partners. So the next step, as mentioned earlier, is that we are looking at a new factory with a partner in Central Europe. And then regarding your question about how we differentiate, if we compare to trays produced in Europe, I think many are fairly similar. They are clean trays. We don't have any harmful chemicals in the trays. Where we are a bit special is that we have been able to produce a tray with a modified atmosphere, which means that we can achieve high shelf life on the products. So if you have ready-made meals packed in our products, you can have a shelf life in a refrigerator, not a freezer, of a couple of weeks. So there we are a bit special. But the big question is not really how special are we. The big question is how can we increase capacity and actually make this product more available to the market, because there is really a big demand for this type of product.
Thank you. And my last question. We have seen large pulp price increases the last year. while your input costs like pulpwood have been at very low levels. How do you expect this input cost to develop into H2?
Yeah, the big part of our input cost is wood. And we don't foresee any big price changes on the wood side. There's good availability thanks to the strong demand in the sawn timber sector. On electricity side, we have our hedges. Then when it comes to other input costs, chemicals, there we do see that there's a lot of demand in the world. The economy is doing well, so we do see some increases and inflation on that side, also driven by higher energy costs and maybe also by lack of availability due to the shipping issues that we see.
Thank you very much, Monica, and thank you for the presentation today and for taking the time to present here today. And also thank you for all who listened in today.
And thank you from my side as well.
Have a nice day.